Welcome back to our channel. Do you remember the face of the perfect 90s boyfriend? Impossibly handsome, yet approachable. A certified genius, yet somehow still one of us. But a photograph, a memory, is only a single frame. It doesn't show you what happened before the shutter clicked, or the long, silent hours that came after. It captures the smile, but it can't capture the struggle. This is a story about a boy who became a prince in the ephemeral kingdom of teenage dreams, a boy who held the world in the palm of his hand. But it's also a story about the crushing gravity of reality, about what happens when the applause fades and you're left alone with the echo. This is the deeply human and ultimately heartbreaking story of Jonathan Brandis and the fight for a life beyond the shadow of a ghost he could never outrun himself. To truly understand the trajectory of Jonathan Brandis, you have to transport yourself back to a world that feels both recent and ancient, the 1990s. It was the last decade of the analog age, a brief, hopeful pause before the digital flood. Fame in this era was a different kind of beast. It wasn't spawned from a viral video or a carefully curated social media feed. It was manufactured, bestowed from on high by a handful of powerful gatekeepers, studio executives, casting directors, and the high priests and priestesses of the teen press. Magazines like Tiger Beat, Bop, and 16 Magazine were the Bibles of youth culture. They were kingmakers. Through their glossy pages, a select few young men were anointed as idols. They were presented as flawless archetypes, the sensitive artist, the rugged bad boy, the charming boy next door. This system created an intense, concentrated form of celebrity. The chosen few weren't just famous, they were ubiquitous, their faces becoming a shared cultural touchstone. But this fame was a gilded cage. The image was everything, and it was meticulously controlled. The real person behind the poster had to fit the mold, or at the very least, pretend to. It was into this high-stakes, high-gloss world that a preternaturally gifted child from the East Coast was about to step. Jonathan Gregory Brandis was born on April 13th in 1976 in Danbury, Connecticut, a world away from the sun-drenched fantasy of Hollywood. He was an only child, and from the very beginning he was exceptional. His mother, Mary, was a teacher and later his manager, and his father, Greg, was a firefighter and food distributor. They weren't a showbiz family, but they recognized a unique spark in their son. He wasn't just bright, he was dazzling. He was reading novels by the age of 4. His memory was photographic. His curiosity was boundless. This wasn't a case of pushy parents forcing a reluctant child into the spotlight. By all accounts, Jonathan was drawn to performing. It started small. At 4 years old, he was modeling for Buster Brown shoes. By 5, he was landing commercials, his cherubic face selling everything from Kix cereal to Fisher-Price toys. But it was his role on the long-running soap opera, One Life to Live at the age of 6, that signaled something more. He wasn't just a cute kid hitting his marks. Even then, on the grainy television screens of 1982, you could see a focus, an intensity that was startling in a child so young. He was working, and he was learning, absorbing the mechanics of the craft with the same sponge-like intellect he applied to books. Recognizing that his talent was outgrowing the opportunities on the East Coast, the Brandis family made a life-altering decision. When Jonathan was 9, they packed up their lives and moved to Los Angeles. It was an enormous gamble, a leap of faith into the most competitive industry on earth, all for the dream of their only child. For years, Jonathan worked the circuit of the journeyman child actor. He was a guest star on all the big shows of the era: Who's the Boss, Full House, L.A. Law, Murder, she wrote. He was building a resume that many adult actors would envy, earning a reputation for being the kid who always showed up prepared, professional, and delivered a performance beyond his years. He was reliable, he was serious, and Hollywood was beginning to take notice. The turning point from being a working child actor to a burgeoning star came in 1990, a landmark year for him. He was cast as the young Bill Denbrough in the television adaptation of Stephen King's magnum opus, It. It was a demanding, complex role. Stuttering Bill is the heart of the Losers Club, a boy reeling from the guilt and grief of his little brother's murder. He is the one who must rally his friends to confront an ancient, unimaginable evil. To play Bill meant more than just acting scared. It required portraying a deep well of sorrow, a simmering rage, and the burden of leadership. And crucially, it required adopting a believable stutter, a technical challenge for any actor, let alone a 14-year-old. Jonathan's performance was nothing short of a revelation. He didn't just mimic a stutter, he embodied the frustration and shame that came with it. When he struggled to get his words out, you felt his character's pain. It was a performance of incredible empathy and technical skill, and it anchored the first half of the miniseries. He held his own and often outshone the adult actors who would follow. It became a cultural phenomenon, terrifying a generation of children and cementing Jonathan's status as a serious young talent to watch. Almost immediately after, he was catapulted into the lead role of a major motion picture, flying to Germany to star as Bastian Bucks in the NeverEnding Story 2, The Next Chapter. Now, he wasn't just part of an ensemble, he was the hero, the face on the poster. The film itself didn't capture the magic of the original, but that hardly mattered. Jonathan Brandis had arrived. He had the dramatic chops proven by It, and the leading man looks confirmed by the NeverEnding Story. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when he starred alongside martial arts legend Chuck Norris in the 1992 film Sidekicks. The movie was a lighthearted adventure, and it showcased a new side of him, the action hero. He trained in martial arts for the role, performing many of his own stunts. He could do drama, he could do fantasy, he could do action. He was the complete package. The industry was primed, the teen magazines were waiting, and then came the project that would change his life forever. In 1993, the name Steven Spielberg was a golden ticket. He was at the height of his powers, and anything he touched turned to cultural gold. When it was announced that he was producing a new futuristic television series for NBC, the industry held its breath. The show was SeaQuest DSV, an ambitious, high-concept adventure pitched as an underwater Star Trek. It was set in the near future of 2018, aboard a massive submarine patrolling the newly colonized oceans. At the heart of this billion-dollar vessel was a character written specifically to be the audience's guide, Lucas Wolinchak, a teenage computer prodigy. Spielberg himself handpicked Jonathan Brandis for the role. It was the kind of endorsement that minted stars overnight, and Lucas was the perfect character for him. He was a genius, a loner who felt more comfortable with circuit boards than with people, and he was thrust into a world of adventure. He was the show's soul. He was the kid who got to live the ultimate fantasy, working alongside legendary actor Roy Scheider and helping to save the world every week. The world's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. SeaQuest DSV was a massive hit, and Jonathan Brandis became almost overnight one of the most famous teenagers on the planet. The numbers were astronomical. He was receiving, by his own account, over 4,000 pieces of fan mail every single week. His face was a permanent fixture on the covers of Teen Beat, Bop, Tiger Beat, and countless other magazines across the globe. He went on fan tours to shopping malls in Australia where thousands of screaming girls would wait for hours just to catch a glimpse of him. He was the thinking girl's heartthrob. In interviews, he wasn't just charming. He was breathtakingly articulate. He would discuss quantum physics, the philosophical implications of the show, his love of literature. He presented as a serious, thoughtful young man who just happened to be a superstar. This combination of intelligence and beauty created a rabid devotion among his fans. They didn't just want to date him, they felt like they knew him. He was the sensitive, brilliant boy who would understand their deepest thoughts. But behind the global phenomenon, a different reality was taking shape. Jonathan was just 16 years old when the show began, working grueling 12 to 14-hour days on a high-pressure set. The show itself was having an identity crisis. The star Roy Scheider famously grew frustrated, wanting a more scientifically grounded program, while the network pushed for more fantasy and sci-fi elements. Jonathan, ever the professional, found himself in the middle, becoming the show's most dedicated ambassador. He defended it in the press, he promoted it tirelessly, he was the loyal company man. He was, in effect, a teenager carrying the weight of a massive corporate enterprise on his shoulders. His own adolescence was being sacrificed at the altar of his fame, and yet even in the eye of this hurricane, his innate character shone through. There's a rarely told story from his time in Florida, where SeaQuest was filmed. Away from the cameras and the press junkets, Jonathan and his father made regular, unpublicized visits to the Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children. He would spend hours with young patients, not as a celebrity doing a photo op, but as a friend. He'd sit on their beds, talk about movies and school, and listen to their stories. A hospital staffer later recalled his profound gentleness and patience, his ability to connect with these children on a deeply human level. It revealed a core truth about him. He craved genuine connection, an authenticity that his life as a teen idol could never provide. The smile on the magazine cover was for everyone, but these quiet moments of empathy were his own. In the world of entertainment, nothing is permanent. For Jonathan Brandis, his career decreased in 1996. After 3 seasons and a major retooling, SeaQuest DSV was canceled. At the age of 20, the biggest teen idol in the world was, for all intents and purposes, unemployed. He was now faced with the most treacherous journey in Hollywood, the transition from teen sensation to credible adult actor. This is a path littered with casualties. For every Leonardo DiCaprio who successfully navigates it, there are 100 others who vanish. Jonathan's face, the very asset that had made him a star, suddenly became his biggest liability. Casting directors no longer saw a versatile actor. They saw Lucas Wolinchak. They saw the boy on the lunchbox, not a leading man capable of complex adult roles. The phone, which had once rung off the hook with offers, grew quiet. The avalanche of scripts turned into a trickle. To his immense credit, Jonathan refused to give up. He actively sought out roles that would shatter his clean-cut image. He chose grit over glamour. He took a small but pivotal role in Ang Lee's acclaimed Civil War film, Ride with the Devil, alongside Tobey Maguire and Skeet Ulrich. He played a cocky young rebel, and he was excellent. He had a role in the indie dramedy Outside Providence, and he tried his hand at a romantic comedy called A Fling with an Angel. He was working, he was stretching, he was fighting to be seen as more than just a memory from the 90s. But these roles, solid as they were, failed to gain traction. The audience that had worshipped him as a teen didn't follow him to the art house. He found himself trapped in a painful purgatory, too famous to start over, but no longer famous enough to command the roles he deserved. What most people don't know, what gets lost in the tragic final chapter of his life, is that Jonathan was reinventing himself. He was cultivating a life behind the camera. He was a writer, a creator, with stories of his own to tell. This wasn't a mere hobby. It was a passion he pursued with the same intensity he had once brought to acting. He wrote numerous screenplays and even sold a pilot script to Disney. He had a burning desire to direct, to be the one shaping the narrative. In 2002, he took a significant step toward this goal, writing and directing a short film called The Slainville Boys. It was a dark, gritty crime drama, a world away from the utopian optimism of SeaQuest. He scraped together the funding, called in favors, and poured his heart into this project. It was his declaration of independence, his attempt to show the world the artist he had become. The film had a small festival run, but it was proof that he was more than just a former teen idol. He was a filmmaker. A friend later recalled him being more proud of that short film than almost any of his acting roles. It was his. It was his voice, unfiltered. But the industry that had so eagerly consumed his image seemed largely indifferent to his art. He was desperately trying to turn the page, but Hollywood seemed determined to keep the book closed. This slow, grinding disappointment of his professional life was beginning to take a heavy toll. It's here that we must approach the most sensitive part of his story with the nuance and compassion it deserves. The narrative of Jonathan's death is often tragically oversimplified, pinned on a single event. But a man's life is not a simple equation. His despair was not born in a day. It was a slow accumulation, a death by 1,000 cuts. His relationship with actress Tatiana Ali, which had been a bright spot in the late 90s, had ended. He was feeling increasingly isolated. The friends who had surrounded him at the height of his fame had moved on. He was left with a small, loyal circle who saw his struggle but felt powerless to stop his downward spiral. He would have periods of optimism, getting excited about a new script he was writing or a potential audition. But the dark moods, the bad days as friends called them, became more frequent and more profound. Then came the role that felt like his last best hope. In 2002, he was cast in Heart's War, a major Hollywood production starring Bruce Willis and Colin Farrell. It was a prestigious World War II drama, the kind of film that could relaunch a career. The role was not large, but it was significant. He poured everything he had into it, proud of his work and desperate for it to be his comeback. He attended the premiere, hopeful that this was the turning point, but as he sat in the dark theater, his heart sank. His performance, the one he had pinned so many hopes on, had been almost entirely cut from the final film, reduced to a few non-speaking frames. For an actor, it's a professional blow. For a man already struggling with depression and feelings of worthlessness, it was a public execution. It was the confirmation of his deepest, darkest fear that he was irrelevant, that he had become invisible. It wasn't just about the movie, it was about what it symbolized. It was Hollywood itself telling him, "We don't see you anymore." On the evening of November 11th, 2003, Jonathan was at his apartment in Los Angeles. He had been drinking and was said to be agitated, complaining about his career. His friends were there with him. At some point, he grew quiet and left the room. When a little too much time had passed, his friends went to look for him. What they discovered is a scene of unimaginable horror. They found him in the hallway of his apartment building. He had attempted to take his own life. Here is an emotionally striking and utterly devastating fact that is often lost in the retelling. Jonathan was still alive when they found him. They immediately called for help. Paramedics rushed him to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, one of the best hospitals in the world. For a few agonizing hours, there was a sliver of hope. His friends, his family waited, praying for a miracle. But the damage was too profound. Jonathan Brandis was pronounced dead from his injuries on November 12, 2003. He was 27 years old. He left no note, only a silence that has echoed for years. The news of Jonathan Brandis's death was a profound shock. For the generation that grew up with him, it felt like a death in the family. It didn't make sense. How could the boy who had everything, the looks, the talent, the intelligence, the adoration of millions, end up so lost? His story was quickly flattened into a cautionary tale about the dangers of child stardom, a simplistic label for a deeply complex life. And while there is truth in that, the ultimate significance of his story is far broader and far more personal. It is a heartbreaking examination of identity. What happens when the identity that has defined your entire life is stripped away? Jonathan wasn't just an actor who lost his fame. He was a man who didn't know who he was supposed to be without it. In a poignant interview years earlier, when asked about his future, he said something telling, "I want to be a good man." It wasn't about being a famous man or a rich man, it was about character. The tragedy is that he was, by all accounts, already a good man. He was kind, he was loyal, he was brilliant, he was deeply empathetic. But the illness of depression, amplified by the harsh judgment of the industry he loved, blinded him to his own worth. His death is a powerful indictment of a culture that builds people into disposable gods, and a stark reminder of the human cost of our collective obsession with fame. But more than anything, it is a devastating lesson on the importance of mental health. Jonathan's struggle took place in the shadows, as so many do, especially for men who are taught to equate vulnerability with weakness. We can only wonder what might have been if he had lived in a time, in a world, where he felt safe enough to say, "I'm not okay," and for that world to have responded not with judgment, but with help. In the final analysis, Jonathan Brandis was not a cliché. He was not just another fallen star. He was a son who was deeply loved, a loyal friend, a gifted artist fighting to be heard, a sensitive soul in a callous world. He dreamed of telling stories, and for a brief incandescent period, his own life was a story that captivated the world. The profound tragedy is not that his story ended, but that he was cruelly convinced it was already over. His life was not a cautionary tale to be pitied, but a human life to be remembered. And his memory leaves us with a quiet, urgent plea to look past the glare of the spotlight, to see the fragile, beautiful, and often aching humanity that lies within us all, and to build a world where every single person knows that their second act is not just possible, but is waiting to be written. So that wraps up today's video. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, leave a comment with your feedback, and subscribe to stay updated on upcoming videos. Appreciate you watching.